I came out in 2009. 2009. But transgender people have existed forever. The word transgender is a fairly recent term within the last 100 years, but there are a lot of historical mentions of people who do not identify as either gender or who identify as a different gender. Native Americans have have a term that is two-spirit, and it's basically like there's two spirits living in the same body that are male and female in the same body. I'm Jewish, and in the Torah there are, I think, there's at least 4 genders, I think, that are mentioned. And in a lot of older texts, there are things like that where it's a more complex thing than we realize. It's been going on for as long as people have existed. Just like there have always been gay people. We just didn't necessarily identify them, and we didn't necessarily discriminate against them. So really what's new is the discrimination, that more than anything. But I believe one of the first people who came out was a soldier in England, I want to say, around I can't remember if it was World War I or World War II, but after the war, met with a doctor and started having surgeries and transitioning, and it didn't go very well, and she ended up dying, sadly, after about 12 surgeries. But that was the first instance that we really knew of in recent times. Single stall. That's my most comfortable because I think it's a weird concept in general that we pee next to each other sometimes. It's just like, when did we decide that that was appropriate and a comfortable thing for us? Like, that's just weird to me in general. And in our private lives, in our own bathrooms, we don't have like 2 toilets next to each other with a sheet of metal in between. We have a bathroom, and then we have somewhere else in the house, if we're lucky, another bathroom. And we wouldn't combine those in our own homes, and it's just a matter of efficiency that we do that. But there are places that have, instead of just like the stalls, you get like a full wall and a full door, and it's like multiples of those in a bathroom. And that, I think, would be the best option. Like, you still can have it in like a small area that's like a small room, but if you just make the stalls more complete, it would work better, I think. It would be more private. You'd be able to, just do your business in a little bit more privacy. And that's if you can't have like multiple single stall bathrooms. That would be my thought. Of course. My school actually recently, about end of February, had an incident at a basketball game. It actually became national news. But basically what happened is our team, which is a white predominantly team, was playing in an inner city school district that was an entirely minority team. And some of the students, 7 or 8 of them in the student section, started chanting Trump, 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 while the other team was taking foul shots. And the other team was offended, understandably so, because it's not about saying the president's name, but there was no reason to say the president's name. He wasn't there, he wasn't officiating, he wasn't shooting. And so it was clear that the mention of his name was intended as an attack. And there have actually been other things that have happened in Connecticut districts, sadly, where one school chanted at another minority school, a white school mostly, to a minority school chanted SAT scores because the white school was higher. And another incident, build the wall, build the wall, build the wall. And so that's sadly something that's been happening since roughly November 2nd or so. Can't imagine why. And it's sad because it's, I try to be jocular about it, but our principal decided that he was going to address it to the whole school. And the reaction was, from some students, particularly those who were chanting, you're inhibiting our free speech, which as students, they don't have complete free speech anyways, but they don't know that really well. They don't accept that. And parents, of course, had backlash, but fortunately, like, all the teachers were like, yeah, that's not something you chant at a basketball game. And so we've had, ever since that assembly, a really tense atmosphere. And on Monday, we had what's called a peace talk. And so we had selected a group of students from both sides of the issue. They sat in a circle and they went around and talked about it. And sadly, the reaction was that the students who were on the chanter side did not have any concern about the other students. And if you've heard the term safe space, basically they mocked it and said there aren't safe spaces in the real world, why should you get them in high school? Not thinking to themselves there are safe spaces in the real world and you can't discriminate in the real world. And they just didn't seem to get that. So there's still work to be done at my school, and I'm glad that I can be there to help them with that. But it is something that exists across a lot of schools, especially in the current political climate. And we know also, I mean, it was just like I was saying about the bathrooms, like, when did that become an okay thing? I don't know. The solution that I would suggest, instead of completely redoing the bathroom, curtains are often usable. And if you get ones that you can sort of like lock into place so that people can't be like, ah, that kind of thing. Also, if you make sure that if somebody does go, ah, they get like expelled or something because that's a severe infringement on privacy, that would be what I would recommend. If you can just have it so that like each shower head that already exists just gets like a 3 foot by 3 foot curtain around it, and not like this big, like 3 feet square on the ground, roughly. That would be my best suggestion for that. Absolutely. I mean, I don't think at all that those chants would have happened, even in some sort of other respect, even if they hadn't been chanting the president's name. I don't think they would have been comfortable chanting something racist at a basketball game if it wasn't for the fact that the current administration, the current federal administration, makes it okay to do that. Absolutely. And for now, there isn't anything we can do at the federal level until the next election, probably. And of course, even if we did get him out before his presidential era is over, his vice president is not much better. And so, in the meantime, we have to teach our students somehow, you still have to be respectful. And chanting things at people, unless you're saying, you're awesome, is not acceptable. And figuring out how to do that is difficult. And so one of the things that I know some schools are doing is there are programs that, for example, the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, has, where they come into the school and they teach the students about how to handle those situations. And they teach the students, this is why you can't say these things. This is how to explain to your peers you can't say these things. Because they do have some freedom of speech, but they also, in schools, there's a certain level of respect that they have to follow. As for the parents, that's a lot more difficult. One of the things that you can do is if you have somebody come in to try to explain, these are the reasons that we're doing these things, they can be more understanding. I think a lot of the times they immediately jump to their political beliefs or their religious beliefs and forget about the human identity. And helping them remember that there are identities other than their own can help them understand, I should do this, I shouldn't do this, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. I know a lot of people who, I mean, not to toot my own horn or anything, but after meeting me have said, you know what, I never knew a transgender person before you, and you're like really normal, so I guess trans people are okay. And it's a sad thing that they have to meet somebody like that to understand, but I think it's going in that direction. I think transgender people are becoming more common to see in media, and I think that that's helping. And then I think the other part of it is if you need to, like for the bathrooms, for instance, for the locker rooms, that's a privacy issue for everybody. Why are we forcing kids to be naked around each other? That seems weird, right? Like, why? That seems like, number one, we talk, one of the main reasons people are against gender neutral bathrooms is they're like, oh, but they'll go in and like have sex. And the idea is, if they wanted to do that, they would anyways, number one. And number two, they wouldn't, because they don't. But there's this weird thing where we also then, even though we're trying to avoid that situation, put them naked with each other. And I know that this is a scary thought, but some of those people are gay or willing to experiment. And even if they're not, part of locker room talk is making fun of each other. And that's a bad thing too. And there's no teachers in there because you can't have teachers around naked students. And so there's no way to monitor what's happening in there. And you can't put a video camera in because that is child pornography. And that's also a bad thing. So it's this weird situation where I think even if it wasn't transgender kids wanting privacy, I think we should want more privacy for our students, especially in those sensitive areas. And so that's, I mean, for that particular situation, for general just racism, homophobia, transphobia, those things, that's a lot more hard to weed out, especially with the current presidency. And what I hope happens is that eventually something happens where people are like, that's a step too far. And they start to think a little bit differently. And I think that that's been happening lately. I don't know if you guys saw the vote yesterday, but that was also alarming.